Good morning and welcome to IG's early morning call on Monday, the 18th of December. I'm Angela Barnes. Coming up on today's programme. Well, the yen is in the limelight today, with the market expecting the Bank of Japan to signal the end of negative rates at tomorrow's meeting. Meanwhile, Uber joins the S&P 500. The stock already gained 10% since the announcement of its inclusion earlier this month. And in US earnings, FedEx and Nike are expected to provide early indications on the holiday season. Well, let's start by taking a look at volatility this morning and pull up the VIX chart. Well, as you can see, the VIX is higher on the day, up 0.28% at the moment. Volatility was lower throughout November and the start of December, but since Thursday, the VIX has seen higher volatility, increasing by 5%. Well, with 13 minutes to go until the European markets open, this is how the pre-market is looking across Europe. Let's take a look at the FTSE. Well, currently down 0.13%. Meanwhile, France's CAC 40 also set for a lower open in the red, down 0.31%. And Germany's DAX following suit, also in the red, down 0.24% at the moment. Well, investors will be waiting for UK Consumer Price Index data out this week. On Friday, the FTSE closed down and European markets were in a bit of a mixed mood, and that was following a week of key data and central bank action. Well, the FTSE slipped despite a positive reading from the latest Purchasing Managers Index data, which showed private order books at a 6-month high. Investors also digested the latest rate decision from the Bank of England to hold rates steady at 5.25%, and that sent the pound higher against the dollar, while the European Central Bank also maintained its current rates. Well, let's have a look at how things were looking in Asia Pacific overnight. And this was the picture. Well, the Nikkei 225 down 0.64%. Hong Kong's Hang Seng also down 1.09%, and Australia's S&P ASX 200 down 0.22%. Well, this week, the Bank of Japan will meet for the last time this year. Separately, China will release its loan prime rates on Wednesday, while inflation data from Japan is also due on Friday. And then let's move on to the US, because this is what things were looking like on Friday at the end of trading. Well, Dow Jones Industrial Average was up 0.15%, the S&P 500 down just marginally there, 0.1%, and the Nasdaq Composite up 0.35%. Well, the S&P slipped marginally, as I said there, but still logged gains for a 7th straight week to mark its longest winning streak since 2017. Well, the Federal Reserve also extended its pause in interest rate hikes and talked about future rate cuts on Wednesday. The Fed maintained its range between 5.25% and 5.5% in its last meeting of the year. Well, let's have a look at how things are looking early trade across the markets in the US. Well, the US 500 currently set for a marginally higher open, well, currently up 0.29%. The Nasdaq also set to gains, currently up 0.15%, and Wall Street too, up 0.25%. Well, investors will be keeping across US personal consumption expenditure data on Friday and corporate updates from Carnival, FedEx, and fashion giant Nike as well. Well, moving on, in other economic data this week, well, first of all, at 9 a.m., we've got Germany's FO business climate, and that's forecast to rise to 87.8 for the month of December from 87.3 the previous month. And this would be the 4th straight month of increase for the index. And then at 3 p.m. in the US, we've got the NAHB Housing Market Index, which is expected to rebound 2 points to 36 in December. It would be the first rise in 5 months for the index that fell to its lowest level on the year in November. Well, meanwhile, let's just have a look at some currency action, and let's just move over to the US dollar, Japanese yen price chart for you, because little has changed this morning ahead of the all-important Bank of Japan meeting. Policymakers are expected to decide on rates tomorrow. Well, no change is expected, but recently, comments from its governor and other board members let investors believe that a change in monetary policy is in sight. Well, a Reuters poll published at the end of last week shows that 20% of economists believe the Bank of Japan will start dismantling current monetary conditions in January. And over 80% of economists expect the Japanese central bank to ditch negative interest rates by the end of next year. And as you can see from the price chart, well, last week the pair touched a 4.5-month low after Jerome Powell said that the US Federal Reserve could start cutting rates next year if inflation continues to fall. Well, many believe that tomorrow's meeting could provide an opportunity for the Bank of Japan to signal a winding down of its ultra-low rates. Well, the yen is very likely to move tomorrow. A week ago, it rose nearly 2% against the dollar after the Bank of Japan governor flagged several options for what could come next for rates. Meanwhile, the Japanese yen in early trade as well against other currencies. Well, against the pound, it was up. It was also up against the euro and the Australian dollar. Meanwhile, let's talk about Uber because it has joined the S&P 500 today, and that's a significant event for both stock and index. Well, for the stock, joining the S&P 500 generates institutional interest. ETFs tracking the S&P 500, which are the largest funds of their kind in the world, will be forced to buy the stock. For the S&P 500, it's also an important day as Uber Technologies' market capitalization is about $130 billion and is 4 times larger than the average capitalization of the index companies. Well, if we look at the Uber price chart here, just pull that up for you. Well, the announcement of the inclusion to the S&P 500 nearly 3 weeks ago has had a more positive effect than expected on the stock, and this year it has risen by more than 150%. Meanwhile, in US earnings this week, well, the street expects a few earnings reports to come. On Tuesday, FedEx is forecast to post earnings of $4.19 per share, which would be a 24% increase on the same quarter a year ago. Revenue should reach $22.37 billion. On Wednesday, the street expects Micron to post a loss of $1.01 per share on revenue of $4.55 billion. And if we look at the FedEx price chart, well, its stock has climbed this year, rising about 63% year to date. And then if we move over to the Micron price chart, well, its stock has also had a strong year. To date, its share price has risen about 67%, but on the day, it's down nearly 1%. Well, later on Thursday, we have Nike expecting to post a rise in revenue, but on lower earnings. Earnings are forecast to fall by 1.2% to 84 cents per share. Revenue, meanwhile, should reach $13.39 billion, up from $13.30 billion a year ago. As these expectations suggest, the economic environment remains challenging for Nike. In a context of still high inflation, the group continues to struggle with slowing consumer demand. And to counter this situation, Nike had to lower its prices. If discounts help supporting sales and keeping inventories under control, it affects profit margins. Well, Nike earnings will also provide an early picture of this year's holiday season, as this earnings period ended on the 30th of November. Well, if we look at the Nike price chart year to date, its share price is up only 5.72% after seeing its stock fall from early May through to the end of September by 34%. But since reversing some of those losses, you can see there, as I said, the share price currently up on the day 0.29%. And that is Nike for you. We'll be keeping across that. Meanwhile, let's move on to commodities and take a look at oil prices and see how they're performing this morning. So we have US crude, first of all, WTI. That's currently up 0.86% at around $72 a barrel. Meanwhile, Brent is also trading higher, up 0.75% at $77 a barrel. Well, prices are higher this morning, supported by lower exports from Russia and as attacks by the Houthis on ships in the Red Sea raise concerns of oil supply disruption. Well, Russia said on Sunday it would deepen oil export cuts in December by potentially 50,000 barrels per day or more, earlier than promised, as the world's biggest exporters try to support global oil prices. Meanwhile, on Friday, the Baker Hughes total rig count fell by 3 to 623. The number of oil rigs in operation fell to 501 from 503. Let's have a quick look at gold and seeing how that one is doing this morning. Well, it's currently up 0.2%, trading above the $2,000 level. That's after the US Federal Reserve announcement last week, but it has lost some ground, though, since the high seen there on the 3rd of December, but it's still up, as noted, currently up 0.2% on the day. And let's have a look at silver as well, because that has been following a similar trajectory to gold, also up on the day, 0.39%. It has been slightly higher also since the Fed decision following, as noted there, similar trajectory. It was down since its peak as well on the 3rd of December, but has reversed some of those losses. And let's have a quick look at copper as well before we go. And currently it is up, up currently 0.4% at around 85.39, a high not seen since the beginning of August. Recent mine closures and disruptions have acted as a headwind for the base metal. Sorry, at the start of the month it hit 86.39. And that's the high not seen since the beginning of August. But those mine closures and disruptions have acted as a headwind for the base metal. Well, that's all we've got time for this morning on Early Morning Call. Thank you very much for watching. Do keep across all our social media platforms for market insights and updates across the day.